Hello friends, and welcome to Last Night's Table. I'm very excited to announce a return to our regular Dungeons & Dragons game after a brief hiatus I've had. I'm also very excited that the weather is starting to turn, and I was really looking forward to getting my grill out and having a little bit of barbecue. Unfortunately, the weather didn't really agree with my plans, and we kind of got washed out. But, using the power of friendship and imagination, we decided that we could have a very special barbecue episode of Last Night's Table and our Dungeons & Dragons game. Let's start with our cast list. In alphabetical order, we have Aksu, who is a blue lizardfolk ranger. She's rough around the edges and she doesn't get normal human social cues, but she's trying her best. Dalid is a mysterious wizard. They keep their hood up over their face so nobody's actually seen what they look like, but the katana they carry at their hip seems to be from a far-off land. Dristin is a fallen Aasimar paladin. They swore an oath of vengeance against the cultists who kidnapped them as a child, and uses that as a justification for a strong moral code that they carry with them into their adventures. Muse is a half-orc barbarian. She's got some real big sister energy. She's probably the friendliest person that we have in the party until you threaten anybody in the party, and then she'll show you a bad time. Olame is a satyr bard and a real agent of chaos. During the last several sessions that we've had, she's been maneuvering to start sort of a racially charged class revolution for tieflings who have been really kind of downtrodden in the setting. So it's interesting to see this is actually starting to come to fruition in this episode. Finally, we have Palisade, who is a tiefling rogue. She works as a detective for the Port Authority, which is like the local police force, and she keeps getting in trouble by association with the party as they're always up to no good, so she's really got kind of some mom energy, just kind of tired and beat down by their shenanigans. So that's our main player list, and I'm going to get into NPCs as they come up. And actually, there's an NPC who probably warrants a little bit of explanation and backstory here. So in a previous session, the Cult of the Lidded Eye stormed into a fancy dinner that the party was having and tried to make off with several guests, one of which was Olame. Now, there was the chef working at the restaurant that day. His name is Charles. He's a half-orc who works for the Thieves Guild and was Olame's contact there. Charles tries to stop the cultists from carrying off Olame after they knocked her right out, and gets a knife in his ribs for his trouble, which was very unfortunate. After the fight was all resolved, Charles gets a few moments to give some dying words, where they tell Olame that they keep a stash in their apartment under the floorboards, and that he would like them to have it. So the party finally gets an opportunity to follow up on this after chasing down the Cult of the Lidded Eye in the last episode. So today they go to Charles's apartment, which is located in the Greedy Goblin Pub over on Low Street. They have a bit of a problem here because in another previous session they were banned for life from the establishment after the Bloody Fists came in, broke down the door, and the party got into a fight with them. Actually ended up killing a couple of members, which is kind of frowned upon in this establishment. So Dalid wasn't a member of the party then, so he decides he's actually just going to walk into the bar, go up the stairs, and try to break into the apartment. Now, nobody's seen how a wizard might try to break in, because this is normally the territory of what a rogue might do, so Olame decides that maybe a distraction would be in order, and she enters the bar. The bartender and proprietor of the establishment is one Tesh One-Eye. She's a half-orc. She's got a scar over one side of her face, which seems to have, whatever wound that was, blinded her in that eye. And she immediately looks at Olame and declares, "You're banned for life. What are you doing here?" Olame has a magic item, though, that she's going to whip out here. It's a deck of illusions, which we've kind of modified for a homebrew setting. So she pulls out a card and says, "Okay, I'll be on my way." Plays the card, and the prompt here just simply says Steve. So Olame is able to create any character named Steve who shows up as an NPC to talk to Tesh. So this was a little bit awkward, but apparently this was Big Steve, who was Tesh's beau at the time, and apparently they haven't seen each other in many years. Tesh thought that Steve was dead. They have a lover's reunion, but Steve cautions, you thought I was dead because I am dead. I'm just a ghost. You can't touch me. It's too dangerous. I can't hold you one last time. So Tesh is pretty inconsolable. She's very unhappy, but she doesn't hear that Dallard is currently upstairs trying to break down this door to Charles's apartment. So what Dallard is trying to do here is he's tried to find... Well, first he tries the door and finds that it's locked. So he wedges his katana into the door frame to try to jimmy it open, which... That strikes me as being a horrible mistreatment of a martial implement, but then again, Dallad's a wizard, so, maybe they don't have that same respect for it. He tries casting a ray of frost on the lock and then punching it open, which succeeds in hurting his hand, and then in frustration, he firebolts the door. The door is unfortunately resolute and stands firm and closed against him. It's around this time that Palisade sneaks up around the back of the building and climbs up the outside, finding that the second-story window isn't locked because who would climb into a window that way? So she climbs up, opens the window, gets into the apartment, unlocks the door, and asks, "You knocked?" Dallad's pretty annoyed, so they take a look around the apartment. They don't have any real serious problem finding Charles' stash, since they did tell him that it was under a loose floorboard. So they open it up, they find a small box, and decide, Olame had the dying words with Charles, his last moments, so she really ought to be here to open this. So they decide that they're all going to leave and meet up at Palisade's house, where they can actually have a moment with the party all together and open up this box. So the party all gather around, take a look at this box that Palisade has. Olame opens it up, finds inside that there is a letter, a sealed envelope, and a small pouch full of precious stones. They take a look at the letter, which I have here, and I'll just read out to you. Ever since I was a young pup, I've had an obsession with fire. Some of my earliest memories are of the tribe's bonfires. Brisk nights on the savannah, the chill of the night warded off by the roaring flames. The hunters would return with their kill, and everyone would pitch in making dinner. Cleaning and dressing the antelope, patting it down with seasonings, the blend of which was passed down from our grandparents', and finally, the cooking. Cook it low and slow, my mother always said, and that's what we did. There was so much care and attention paid tracking the beast and preparing it for the cook fires that it'd be a waste to rush now and ruin it. So low and slow is what we would do. It takes hours and hours to barbecue an entire antelope. If the hunters arrived with the kill at midday, then we wouldn't be ready to eat until it was full dark. But even so, the full tribe came together. There was singing while we worked and dancing while we cooked. God's willing, there would be drink too. And finally, the moment would come where we would feast. Even still, I found I was missing something in my life. I never knew my father. Mother wouldn't speak of him, but I knew he wasn't of our tribe. It wasn't until I was a teenager that I learned he was human, and I thought I was just a late bloomer. I felt this fire lit under me that I needed to know who my father was. I confronted my mother about him, asked her point blank if he was one of the tribes of humans that settled in Gaeldurg. Finally, she relented and told me that my father came from the city, that he hailed from Landenport. That was when I realized I'd have to leave home to find out who I was, so leave home I did. I don't know what I was expecting when I came to the city, but Landenport is not kind to those of mixed blood. Everything is different than it was in the savannah. The mud and grime gets everywhere, and there's far too many people around. Even the fire is different. There are no bonfires in Landenport. People choose to do cooking either in hearths or on stoves. But cooking was the only skill I had, so I pushed to ply my trade. Well, turns out that the types of folk here who would hire a personal chef are the same types of people who wouldn't deign to look at an orc. My first impressions were poor, and I worried I had made a terrible mistake. And yet, at once, it's so much more interesting than life on the plains. I still feel like there's too many people here, but there are all kinds of people from all over the world, and they bring with them little bits of their culture. Spices from Almerion, wild-grown produce from the elfenwood of the primordial forests, more varieties of ale and spirits from Dorlenhold than I could ever hope to count. This city is a melting pot. It brings everyone and everything together. I got my first job thanks to Tesh One Eye at the Greedy Goblin Pub over on Low Street. She's half orcish too, and good people at that. She showed me that for every stuffed suit, there's a dozen people just trying to get by, and by and large, those people were good people too. It made me second guess my first impressions, and I was finally starting to feel at home. But all the same, I felt that fire burning in me again. If you weren't human or one of a handful of respectable races, the people in charge here would push you into the mud and then see fit to complain that you were in their way. It wasn't long before I found the guild. Or I suppose maybe the guild found me. Either way, they recognized my culinary knack and thought to put it to good use. They used their connections to get me a job at the Barrel and Bottle. I'd be cooking for those stuffed suits that wouldn't look me in the eye. but I'd also know when they were coming and going and could tell my friends in low places when it was safe to commit a spotted burglary. I never did find my father, but I did find a new family here. Being a thief felt more honest than just being a serf for those stuck-up suits. I got to cook as much as I wanted, and as a private joke, I was putting as much orcish cuisine onto the menu as I possibly could. Imagine the looks on the faces of those lords and ladies if they realize they're eating venison a la Black Tusk. Still, cooking in a kitchen isn't the same as the bonfires of my youth. I found myself thinking of home a lot. Any chance I could, I'd get out of town with a rabble of undesirables such as myself, and we'd have a cookout. The meat's different. We don't get antelope this far south, but elk is pretty similar. And being in a port means I have access to all sorts of seasonings that my tribe did not. Still, I found a way to honor the rights of my ancestors in this place that would have seemed so strange and bewildering to them. If you're reading this, then no doubt my time has come. Most likely one of those suits found me out and I've paid the price for dreaming for a little more. And that's fine. I've already made my peace with knowing I'll likely meet my end at the gallows. I've cheated and stolen, but I've lived honorably all the same. Minothor will welcome me in his halls, for I've plundered and lived a full life. I've seen exotic sights my ancestors could not imagine and have amassed treasures enough to make a dwarf blush. But I have one treasure I'd entrust to you, one whose price cannot be measured in neither gold nor precious stones. This is my legacy. Don't part with it lightly. Sincerely, Charles Blacktusk. So at this point, the party is pretty intrigued and they want to see what's inside the sealed envelope. So Olame grabs it, opens it up, and has a look. And it's a recipe for venison a la Black Tusk. It's barbecue. She holds it closely. She really kind of treasures it as something that Charles felt was very important to him and entrusted to her. So she's going to keep it on herself and try to honor him with it. It's around this time that a letter slides under Palisade's door addressed to Olame. Palisade is initially a little bit miffed. What's Olame doing receiving letters in my house, right? But she's kind of come to accept that since the party lacks suitable lodgings of their own for the most part, and they tend to crash in her apartment, that this is sort of just comes with the territory. Olame takes this letter and reads it. It's a message from the Thieves Guild saying that a parcel of land that she had tried to purchase in a previous episode so that the tieflings could have a farm they could work on, the purchase has all gone through, and at their earliest convenience, they should take a stop at the farm and meet with a couple of members of the tiefling community. So that's what they'd like to do. Most of the party heads off directly to the farm, but Palisade has to stop in at work real quick to make sure that she can get the day off. So she goes into the Port Authority, and her boss kind of gives her a compromise. So she can take the rest of the day off as long as she escorts a government official who is actually headed to that same farm to follow up on some missing information in the paperwork for purchasing the land. And the reason that there's some missing paperwork is, so Olame went to the office originally to try to purchase some of this land, to get the paperwork all in order, and snuck around behind the counter and just stamped a form for approval, but didn't fill out any information for it. So the agent's name is Helena Sharp, and she accompanies Palisade to the farm. Meanwhile, the rest of the party is already on the farm, and there's 3 tieflings waiting for them. There's a red tiefling named Fink, who the party had met once before when he had stolen a fish and hid in a burned-out apartment building, hiding in the basement so that he could eat his catch. There's also 2 strangers to them. There's a black tiefling named Rapture and a purple tiefling named Scratch. Olame gives them the pitch that this is going to be sort of a working commune where the tieflings can all kind of gather together, they can work the farm, she's going to help them, and hopefully they can create a sort of livelihood for themselves out of farming. Now, she also recognizes that tieflings are city folk mostly here. They don't have any experience farming, and it's going to take some time for them to sort of get on their feet here. So she's worked out a deal with the Thieves Guild, where the tieflings can supply any sort of information that they find while, lurking around in the city to them. And, if something goes missing from somebody who doesn't really need it, then, certainly that wouldn't fall back on them. Now, Fink is on board. Fink is really excited. He doesn't know anything about farming, but he wants to do some crimes and get back on top. Rapture is excited at the prospect of the farm. Rapture is looking forward to some honest work, and as one of my players said, wants to play Harvest Moon here. But Scratch distrusts this whole thing. He views the whole thing as being really suspicious. He's very offended that Olame would even suggest that they work with the Thieves Guild. They're not all tieflings are thieves, right? So he's very offended there. Before the party can really sort of soothe Scratch's concerns, Palisade and Helena end up showing up on the farm there. So Helena asks if it's a good time to capture a little bit of that missing information from Olame, who seems to be the operator here. So first off, she tries to get her name and is initially confounded by she's got to enter a first name and a family name. And Olame doesn't have a family name. It's just Olame. She's like Cher. Palisade volunteers that the reason that Olame doesn't have a family name is that she isn't actually a citizen of Landonport, which Helena makes a note of immediately there. Going through the rest of the forum, they ask how many residents are going to be on the farm, and Olame says that she's going to be the sole resident, which is something else that Helena makes a note of. And finally, she asks about the purpose of the farm. And Olame explains that she's going to have some farm hands here. She's going to employ tieflings who are a little bit underutilized in town, give them an opportunity to give back to the city. They're going to be growing produce here, which they would like to sell in market, essentially. Clayton makes a note of that too. And she also says that due to the zoning concerns in the city of Landonport, this land is not actually properly zoned for commercial scale farming. If they want to do subsistence farming, that's totally fine, but there's going to have to be more forms and paperwork that they're going to have to fill out, which unfortunately is going to take some time because, well, they already have a whole mess of paperwork that they have to go through, and there's already some missing info which needs to be audited and verified already. She also says that if they decide to just go ahead and sell the produce anyway, that the city of Landonport is going to issue them a WD-14 followed by a 13Z, which is going to basically mean that the city is going to be able to place a lien on the property and then sell it at auction to recoup some of the costs of rezoning. But Helena's captured all the information that she needs to, so she bids them all a good day and she leaves. Scratch is also still really kind of miffed by this whole thing, and now he's heard that the party has essentially lied to a government official, so he decides he doesn't want anything to do with it, and he leaves right there too. But the rest of the party isn't too concerned here, so they say, we got to put the word out that, we're starting up this whole thing, so they tell Fink that, try to gather up as many tieflings as you can to get them to come over here, and we're going to have a party to, celebrate that we've got this new property here. So Fink runs off, and Dristin decides he's got a little bit of business in town with the church too, so he heads into town, but promises to be back in time for the party. It's around this time that a member of the Thieves Guild shows up. So in the city, this guy would be dressed all in black bandana, black pants, black shirt, just black everything, right? And he'd look like, somebody that you wouldn't want to run into in a dark alley or something. But this is mid-morning on a sunny day in a field, and he's hiding behind a fence post, so he kind of looks like a goofball, honestly. So the party wave at him, and he's a little miffed that they can see him, but he comes over and asks, he tells them that they got word that there's going to be some government officials coming to audit some of this paperwork that they helped Olame push through. If they offer to do some coaching so that, when the government official, who was Helena, ends up showing up, they can help them through all the answers, and then is a little bit miffed that they already showed up and came and went. So they ask a couple of questions about what was asked here, and it comes up in the conversation that Olame is not a citizen and that they told Helena as such. So that's a bit of a problem because the bylaws in Landonport say that you have to be a citizen in order to own land, but the Thieves Guild is on top of it. So they say, we just need to submit some falsified reports saying that you've been sponsored by a member of the one of the elite 4 families of Landonport. We just need to know who that's going to be. They'll probably want to interview them as a result of the audit. So they say that's actually fine because we're really close friends with Milton McAllister, who we're going to get into who Milton is in a little bit here. But they are a close friend of the party. They've helped them out before, and they don't see any problem there. So the member of the Thieves Guild, he accepts that, and he says, okay, that's all good. So he runs back to town so that he could, I guess, reverse pickpocket some forms into a filing cabinet. And that leaves most of us just out in the field wondering what they're going to do while they're getting ready for this party. So Olame has the idea that what we're going to do is we're going to take Charles's barbecue recipe and we're going to do it right now today, and we're going to share it with all the tieflings, and it's going to be a good time. It's going to be a celebration. So they have a couple of ideas of what they're going to need to do here, but there is that glaring issue of, well, we have to tell Milton that somebody's going to be interviewing about Olame, and also there's going to be some supplies that we need to get in town. So Muse and Palisade offer to go procure the rest of their supplies and talk to Milton because they're on really good terms with him too. And the rest of the party is, that's Aksu, Olame, Dalid, and Rapture is still hanging out here too. They decide that they're going to actually get ready for the barbecue and the farm and get it all set up. So Rapture and Olame immediately start with the concerns for farming. Olame gives Rapture 1,500 gold, which, well, we did the math on this, and the average annual income of a commoner around Lanaport would be about 50 gold. So this is like 30 years worth of cash for this tiefling that Olame just met today. But it's going to be enough to buy farming equipment, seed for the first year, and all that. Olame also has a plant growth spell, which takes 8 hours for her to cast, but will affect basically a quarter-mile radius around her, to make it a really fertile and ready for everything. So she's going to work on that to make the farm really kind of ready. Aksu takes a look at the recipe, and it calls for one, mature antelope, or rather an elk. So she says, well, I'm a hunter. I'm pretty good at finding meat out in the wild, so I'm going to go out and take a look for that. And that just leaves Dalid, who volunteers to dig the pit that they're going to be ending up using for this barbecue. Now, this is a covered pit barbecue. It's in the Hawaiian style, actually, when I looked up this recipe. So they're going to need this 3-foot deep pit, wide enough to accommodate a barbecue and all their goals and everything. And we hear that Dalid, this scrawny 8-strength wizard, is going to dig the pit. So we're really kind of interested to see, is he going to cast a spell, like some kind of a shape earth kind of thing? But no, he just walks up with a shovel and starts digging. First to arrive in town is Dristin, who has a little bit of business to take care of at his church. So Dristin's main contact is one Cardinal Bishop, who is, that's actually his name, is Bishop. You could say that he's really born for the role. He'd like to make a deal with Bishop in order to sort of cut some of this red tape that the government has. So he says, we've got this group of tieflings who want to be able to give back to the community. We know that although they are fiendish in appearance, they're not actually, fiendish in nature. And what Dristin would like to do is make an arrangement with the church in order to trade building supplies so that they can get the farm basically up and running for their first harvest, so that the church can distribute that food to the city in part of their charitable works. Cardinal Bishop is actually really excited by this. He says that, anytime that we can do good before having to deal with like government red tape, like that's kind of like a two birds kind of situation. So he's pretty pleased to help, and he immediately agrees. He says, let's start this today. We'll get you some building supplies so you can build your first houses and such today even, right? But the word slips that there's going to be a barbecue, and Cardinal Bishop he's big on barbecue, so he says that he's going to come out himself to take a look at things, and he's going to bring another official of the church with him too. So while Dristin is arranging to have all of this building material shipped to the farm, Palisade and Muse are on their way to go talk to Milton McAllister. Now, in order to sort of fill you in on why Milton is important to the party, the McAllister family is one of the official 4 elite, I guess you could call them the oligarchy of Lanaport. The McAllisters are particularly concerned with finance, and there isn't really any money that changes hands that they don't know about. So they're basically a family of accountants. The party first met Milton, who is the youngest heir, and I guess actually he will be the only heir to the McAllister family. They originally met him when the party originally all met together was to investigate the disappearance of another of the oligarchy family of the Winthrops. Her name was Jasmine, and she was engaged in an arranged marriage to Milton at the time. So Milton was a suspect, and they went to go interview him and found out that Milton was actually relieved that she had been kidnapped because he wasn't keen on the marriage, which sounded really kind of suspicious. But it turns out that the reason that he didn't want anything to do with the marriage was because he was gay, and the party kind of took him under the wing and said, you're a sweet boy, we'll look out for you. And he really is a sweet boy, even if he is a bit of a nerd, right? Milton's been through the ringer lately. So in a previous adventure, back when the party was having their fancy dinner, it was for Milton's behalf that they're having it. So they had arranged for him to have a dinner with Dristin, who he's pretty fond of Dristin, if we're being honest. So he had this date there, and then all the cultists break in and they start trying to kidnap people, and Milton was one of the people that they're trying to take, right? But Dristin saves him. They have a real near miss there. But the experience has kind of left him a little bit, it's been a lot for him, right? So Palisade and Muse show up at Milton's house. They knock on the door, and Milton himself answers. He's given his servants the day off, I guess. And he's wearing yesterday's pajamas. He looks pretty bedraggled, and he's all sleepy. And he asks, "What's going on? What do I owe the pleasure? It's usually so good to see you guys, right?" And they explain that they need a favor, which is kind of a given. And that what's going on is they need Milton to vouch for Olamé, because that way she can get her citizenship, and that makes their purchase of the farm all hunky dory. And Milton's really willing to help. He didn't realize that Olamé wasn't a citizen already and would be very happy to vouch for her. But they notice that Milton seems a little bit off. He's really a sad boy today, and they ask him what's going on, and he says, well, his dad has taken ill in the past couple of days, and he's really beating himself up over it. He thinks that it's either because since Milton is the only heir and he almost died in the whole cultist plot of the Barrel and Bottle, that it's maybe the shock of losing his only son, almost losing his only son rather, or maybe it's the circumstances around why he broke off the engagement that has him so stressed out. But either way, he's really kind of concerned for him. And this kind of rings a note for Palisade that she'd like to investigate a little bit later, is that Martin McAllister, the senior McAllister, who's lying on his sickbed right now, was recently implicated in a plot by Billy Bowler, the head of the Bloody Fists, to purchase the abandoned Landon estate. So she'd like to follow up on that later, but this doesn't really seem to be the time right now. So what she does instead is she wants to cheer up Milton, and says, hey, we're planning a bit of a party today, sort of a housewarming for Olamé's new farm. Why don't you come out? It'll be a good time. And you know what? Dristin's going to be there. So he perks up a bit, and he says, you know what? He'll come on out. Is there anything that he should bring? And the party says, well, it's funny you mentioned that. We've got this list of supplies that we need for the barbecue, and we're not really sure where to get all of them. They're a bit more exotic than what we normally see. So he agrees. He'll make a copy of the list, and he'll send out his personal shopper to bring all the supplies right to the farm for them. So that's the party's business in Landonport kind of concluded, so they decide that they're all going to head back to the farm. Dristin is the first to show up basically right around the same time that Fink and the rest of the tieflings end up arriving. So he's got all the supplies from the church, and it's going to be several hours while this barbecue is happening. Low and slow, like Charles would have said. So they decide they've got these building materials. They've got so many hands right now. Let's build our bunkhouse while we wait. We can at least get the frame put up in the time that it takes to barbecue, and many hands make light work. Milton's shopper shows up too, so they've got the barbecue basically all ready to go. It's underway, and the workday takes them basically until it starts to get dark. So they've finished the construction, but it's still going to be a few hours for the barbecue. So the tieflings are kind of excited, but they're getting a little bit agitated that, hey, we worked all day, where's our dinner, right? And that's about when Milton shows up with a wagon full of booze, and he says, hey, is this a party? I thought we were supposed to be like singing and dancing. Let's get this thing going. So he starts distributing free liquor, which is, in my experience, that's the way to get people into a party. So the tieflings start lighting some bonfires because even though it is a full moon, it is getting pretty dark. So let's take care of that. And they start cracking out some fiddles and harmonicas and such and start playing for the night. And then a short while later, it's time for the barbecue to come out. So the meat's on the table, and it gets kind of cut up and served to the party. And it is tender, juicy meat just falling right off the bone. It is truly delicious. But that's about also when the party realizes that there is a guest that they haven't invited here. So this is a gnome that they see. He's wearing a tan-colored suit. He's got a 40-gallon cowboy hat, a big mustache, real bushy, kind of a Sam Elliott thing going on. And he's got a bolo string tie with a big dollar sign on it. And he's eating the barbecue, and he's licking his fingers, and he says, "Boy, howdy! This is some mighty fine barbecue. Who do I have to thank for this wonderful meal?" So Olame introduces herself, and she says, "And who are you supposed to be?" And he says, "Well, I'm glad you asked. My name is Bo Barnabas Quimbley." And he explains that he works for the Nomale International Food Holding Concern. And he's a representative of Mean Green's sauces and condiments. He asks if they've all heard of Mean Green, and they haven't. And who Mean Green is basically like kind of an Aunt Jemima character for half-orcs. So he's the face of a number of sauces. So feeling a demonstration is in order. He pulls a goat sandwich out of his pocket, which he just happened to have with him. And the party's already on edge because anytime we mention eating goats, they get a little concerned for Olame. And out of his other pocket, he pulls a little bottle of Mean Green's original fire sauce, and he sprinkles a couple of dabs on there, and he takes a bite out of the sandwich, and he says, "Whoo, boy, howdy, that's a knee slapper right there." And he really enjoys it, and he says, "This is a pretty good barbecue, but his business is barbecue, and what y'all's got right here, that's a mighty fine barbecue." And what he'd like to do is add the party's barbecue recipe to Mean Green's collection, essentially. Well, he's prepared to make an offer right here today for 50 gold in perpetuity, just to buy the recipe. And the party finds this to be insultingly low because it is a treasure that can't be measured in gold or precious stones. So, sensing a little bit of resistance, Bo raises his offer to 60 gold, but the party says, "No, we're not doing this. Get out," right? Being a little agitated now, Bo Barnabas Quimbley says, "Okay, well, don't let anybody believe that Bo Barnabas Quimbley will be left behind where he's not wanted. But I tell you, Nomale will get their hands on this recipe one way or the other." And then he leaves, right? So from here, the party feels vaguely threatened, which is pretty fair because it's actually around this time that they notice that there are some more uninvited guests circling around the camp right now. It looks like it's a handful, and by handful I mean 8 werewolves just kind of show up on the party unannounced, right? So they start creeping up into the party. And the first thing that we do is we cast a couple of spells at them. So Olame casts Hold Person, which holds a couple of the werewolves in basically a paralyzed state. And Dallad throws a fireball into them. So the werewolves who just got fireballed look over at each other, point at the wizard, and say, "Yep, let's get him." Muse is spoiling for a fight. She's actually really kind of happy to break out her greatsword, which she conveniently just got silvered today. So she goes off onto one flank and starts fighting a couple of werewolves there. Dristin decides that he's going to move up to to cover Dallad because it looks like the werewolves are going to be targeting him specifically since he's throwing fireballs at them and all. And this leaves Palisade and Oxu a little bit exposed, and a couple of the werewolves just run right up to them. It's around this time that the tieflings realize that there's a bit of a problem here, and they start to skedaddle. So Milton is dancing around a bonfire with an attractive tiefling right now, and he sees his partner run away, and he looks around, he sees the werewolves, it's one of the paralyzed ones closest to him, and he says, "Well, that does it. I was just starting to relax and feel a little bit better about myself." And he takes a burning torch out of the bonfire, and he walks right up to that werewolf, and he's like, "Shoo, get out of here, go on, get." and bonks him with a torch. Now, Milton is statted as a first level commoner, so he rolled extraordinarily well and did 2 points of damage to this to this werewolf. So he's in some trouble now, even if he doesn't realize it. So Sadie and Oxu are both ranged combatants primarily, so having a couple of werewolves right in their face is a bit of a problem for them. Sadie is able to disengage and slip away and keep shooting at them. Oxu is a little bit more a little bit less subtle and has to risk an attack of opportunity getting away, but she ends up successfully getting away anyway. It's around this time that, actually the werewolves have a whole bunch of meat points, basically. So we keep wailing on them. Dristin's throwing out some smites, and Dalad's throwing out some more spells, and Muse is grappling as many of them as she can, right? So the fight's going on for a bit. But eventually the hold person spell that Olame was holding begins to weaken here. So the werewolf that Milton is currently threatening with the torch right now is no longer paralyzed, and everybody realizes this is going to be an extreme problem for Milton. So Dalad seems to be holding his own right now, so Dristin uses a Misty Step spell in order to get right up next to Milton. And Milton is a little bit flushed. He's all like, "Oh, Dristin, I didn't see you there. We can take this sucker together." And so he's still in the fight. So Dristin's telling him to run. Milton's not hearing it, and he takes another swing at the werewolf, who decides, you know what, this should be a pretty easy kill here. So the werewolf bites him. Milton doesn't have a whole lot of hit points. He's just been bit on the shoulder, and he gets knocked unconscious right there. During the scuffle, Beau Barnabas Quimbley shows up, and he decides he's going to try to steal himself a little bit of that barbecue. Olame sees this, so she casts a healing word on Milton so that he doesn't, just die right there. She needs him, right? And uses her remaining action in order to shoot Beau, which knocks him right out. He doesn't have a lot of hit points either. Dalad throws another fireball out just as Milton is getting up. So Milton's got his hand around Dristin's waist. He's holding himself up with the torch, and he's ready to take another swing at him when this werewolf blows up into a ball of fire, right? So in Milton's eyes, he really, quite heroically killed that werewolf, and Dristin was there to watch him do it. Most of the wolves have been mopped up at this point, and there's one left who realizes that, they haven't really gotten truly into the fight yet. But all of their friends are dead right now. So they decide that they're going to leave, but not before they take a chomp out of Sadie. So Sadie ends up getting bit, and she fails her saving throw against lycanthropy. So that's going to be something interesting that we're going to have to explore in the next session, I think. This wolf tries to flee, and Oxu uses a restraining shot against it, and she's successful. So she shoots this werewolf, and a whole bunch of vines and thorns spring up from the ground and hold it into place, which is basically a death sentence for this werewolf. The rest of the party kind of converges on it. Milton and Dristin are charging into the battle together, but they don't get there in time before basically everybody kills this werewolf. And that is pretty much the excitement concluded for the evening. So they still have the issue of Beau Barnabas Quimbley is all knocked unconscious next to a table of barbecue there. So Olame decides, she's got a rope of mending. She's going to hog tie him and make sure that he doesn't get away. And they're going to deal with that in the next session, I think. It was right around here that we decided we were going to call it a night. And that's probably good. There's plenty of loose ends for this to deal with, but that's also good for just, starting the next session. And this concludes our special barbecue episode of Last Night's Table. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, make sure you give it a like and subscribe to my channel. And I think next week we're planning on probably visiting Blades in the Dark setting, which this might be a one-off, but it's pretty exciting for me because I get to play as a player. But failing that, we might end up exploring some more of the wider world. So if you'd like to just leave a comment on anything that you might want to know about the world at large, please do so, because it gives me a good idea of what I should be working on for this podcast. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.